Today's Mercedes-Benz interview of the day brought to you by the utterly inspired all-electric EQE sedan from Mercedes-Benz. And you'll find out the vehicle all-electric, but the feeling is all Mercedes. The EV that recharges you. Learn more, MBUSA.com/EQE. We'll get to phone calls coming up. Also, settle on a poll question. We welcome back our good friend Chris Mannix, who joins us from Boston. He was there for Game 2 last night. On loan from Sports Illustrated, their senior NBA writer. How would you sum up last night?
I don't know if dominant would be the word I'd use, but a pretty convincing win overall by the Celtics. I mean, that game one, I think they needed a game like that. That was just the second game they've played in these playoffs, Dan, where they've had to play some clutch time minutes like they did down the stretch in regulation and overtime. And that's kind of been the story of this Celtics season. Like they have one of the largest point differentials in NBA history during the regular season. They've largely cruised through a lot of these games in the playoffs. They needed some kind of, like kind of a sharpening game, if you will. And I think they got that in game one. Then they came out in game two. And yeah, Indiana had some moments, where they played well, but really from start to finish, this was a game the Celtics completely controlled.
Is it fair? This seems like it's almost a national pastime of the national media and their opinion, criticisms of the Boston Celtics, that they have been incredibly successful up to a point, and then they can't win that title. But they had a historical season. What they've done since 2017 should be applauded, but they have to win. So the national media's role in all of this, in kind of piling on the Celtics, how does that feel to you?
I think it's fair to a degree because they haven't won that championship. I do think you have to look at each of these seasons, and you really go back to the 2017-18 season, Jason Tatum's first year in the NBA, and that's where it kind of all begins. And they've been to a lot of conference finals, but how many of them do you think they should have won, right? Like last year, I think is the one year where you can say this team underachieved. To not be able to beat Miami in a conference finals, that was a letdown. This year, looking at the rest of the field, if they don't win a championship, it is a disappointment. It is underachieving. So I understand the criticism to an extent, but last year, unquestionably the one year that they should have done more. And this year, if they can't win the whole thing, and it doesn't really matter who they play out of the Western Conference, Dallas, Minnesota, it will be viewed as a failure, and I think rightfully so.
Yeah, just trying to figure this out, that sometimes, I don't know if we looked at the Bulls with Michael Jordan and the degree of difficulty of what they so-called went through. You went through a banged-up Lakers team. Was Seattle a great team? Were the Utah Jazz a great team? The Phoenix Suns were an older team. But I don't think we look back and go, well, but Jordan, but we will do that to LeBron. Like, well, he won in the bubble. Well, last I looked, everybody played in the bubble. But we kind of pick and choose with certain topics here. And I think the Celtics, what they've done has been pretty incredible. And if they don't win, they're going to get a sigh of relief, it feels like. It's like when the Dodgers won the World Series with Dave Roberts, Clayton Kershaw. It's like, whew, it feels that way for this Celtic team. And I don't know if we're being fair to them.
I think, Dan, if the Celtics win a championship this year, all the things that they've been kind of criticized for up until this point will now almost become praiseworthy, right? Like, It's like they've got the championship and they've got the 6 trips to the conference finals. Like, look at this unprecedented level of success. Look at how this team has been able to win at or near the highest level every year. You'll start talking about like 6 conference finals, 2 trips to the NBA finals, 1 championship. Like all of a sudden, the narrative they're getting slapped around with, that they're good enough to get to a certain point, but not good enough to win, that Tatum and Brown are good enough to be a great regular season team, but maybe not good enough to win a championship. All that will be gone. It will be part of a broader story where, it's like this team has gone through the necessary steps to get there. And now this could be the beginning of a new Celtics dynasty.
Yeah, it's like the Braves in the 90s. They could get to the World Series, but they can never win. Who is this Kyrie Irving? Where did he come from? This version of Kyrie. How did this happen?
Dan, I didn't hear many of them, but I did hear a few chants at the Garden last night of "We want Kyrie." So if you're looking for a good storyline in the NBA Finals, it's Dallas, Boston, Kyrie making his return to the Garden. Because I promise you, those fans there have not forgotten, that 18-19 season and the exit for Kyrie. To Kyrie's credit, you talk to people in Dallas, and he has been just a model citizen from day one. Now, some of that, I'm sure, for Kyrie was by necessity, right? Like he forced his way out of 3 championship-level situations in Cleveland, Boston, and Brooklyn. And if he didn't make it work in Dallas, I'm not sure where he would have wound up and what kind of contract he would have wound up on. So there was certainly pressure on him to evolve and to be a good teammate, locker room guy. But he has been that. He has been that, tenfold with that team. You see the post-game press conferences that he has with Luka Doncic, and it's clear they like, playing together. They like being teammates. And you just watch some of these games, Dan. I had some coaches texting me during the last round. They were saying to me, like, are you watching Kyrie Irving? I'm like, yeah, he's great. He's scoring. He's making improbable shots. They're like, no, like he looks like he's trying on the defensive end much more than they've ever seen him try in the past. Now, he's never going to be a great defensive player, but if he's giving you average to slightly above average defense, his offense is so good and his shot making is so good that there's very few players in the league, at least guards, that are better than him. So this has been a purposeful evolution of Kyrie Irving to get him back to the point where, once again, we're talking about him as being one of the great players in the NBA and not one of the great distractions in the NBA.
He's Chris Mannix, Sports Illustrated, NBA senior writer. What are the Lakers waiting for hiring a coach?
Whenever I talk to coaching agents and people kind of that are staying abreast of the process, JJ Redick seems to be the front runner here. And even those that have, clients that have interviewed there or have had discussions with them, they consistently say to me, like, they think it's JJ's job to lose. Now, what they're waiting for, I'm not exactly sure. I do think that the fact that Cleveland fired JB Bickerstaff, which we're going to have a separate conversation about, but the fact that the Cavs let go of JB Bickerstaff, I think that will probably accelerate this process a little bit, because I do think there could be and will be some overlap with coaches the Cavs are looking at and coaches the Lakers are looking at. I'm talking about James Borrego, who is high on a lot of teams' list right now. I think Sam Cassell could have an opportunity in Cleveland as well. That could push the Lakers to make a decision sooner rather than later. Because, Dan, if you're looking at this in a vacuum, Cleveland's a better job than LA right now. It's kind of as simple as that. Not only is there younger talent there, specifically Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley and Darius Garland, but you're in the Eastern Conference, and you can have, as we saw in the West, a great 49-50 win season and feel good about yourself and still wind up in the play-in tournament and not make the postseason overall. So I do, it's a long way of saying kind of two ways. I do think JJ Redick is the front runner for this job. And I also think the Cavaliers now starting their coaching search could push the Lakers to make a decision sooner rather than later.
I just can't believe that when the reports say LeBron is not involved in this. Okay. Nobody has had a more scripted, manicured career, maybe in all of sports, than LeBron. He knows exactly what he's doing, how he's doing it, where he's doing it, who he's doing it with. And now, at the end of his career, he's all of a sudden not involved in this? I find that really hard to believe.
Yeah, I think LeBron's camp would tell you that, by and large, he's rarely been hands-on when it comes to hiring head coaches in whatever situation he's been in, right? Like, there's no doubt that going back a few years ago, in 2019, he wanted Ty Lue to be the head coach of the Lakers. That relationship is well documented, and it didn't work out for different reasons, but that was the coach that he certainly wanted. I think LeBron's camp will tell you that he's going to get criticized for whatever issues he has with a coach one way or the other. So it behooves him to kind of stay above the fray and stay out of
Yeah,
that
but
mix.
if you're going to get criticized, then be involved in it.
Well, I kind of agree with that. And I also think, Dan, whether or not LeBron is part of like a text chain with Rob Pelinka and Jeannie Buss about who the next Lakers coach is going to be, they're making these decisions in part with LeBron in mind. Like, they're not hiring JJ Redick if they think he and LeBron are going to clash. They're not considering James Borrego if they think he and LeBron don't share similar basketball philosophies, don't have similar basketball minds. So in a way, it's like a distinction without a difference. Yes, LeBron might not be hands-on with the next head coach, but at the same time, no team, including the Lakers, has ever hired a head coach without taking LeBron's feelings into account.
Yeah, because he's doing a podcast with the leading candidate for the Lakers job. So
that's a weird. If that comes to fruition, Dan, just to kind of expand on a little bit, I just find that to be look. I think JJ is a very smart basketball guy, but you saw the Udonis Haslem comments from last week, and look, Haslem has skin in the game there, right? He's a Chris Quinn guy. He wants to see Chris Quinn get a job, his former assistant down in Miami. But he's not wrong about some of these things. I do think there's an element to, players in that locker room potentially, looking at JJ funny, wondering certain things about that relationship with LeBron James when you can't have that. You need to have, kind of unflinching faith in your head coach, or else it's just not going to work.
Yeah, but none of those guys have status in that Laker locker room. I mean, maybe Anthony Davis. When LeBron's gone, AD will be gone. And, in 2 years.
That's true.
Now, the only thing that I could see with the Lakers is if I'm hiring J.J. Redick, what kind of coach is he going to be 2 years from now when he doesn't have LeBron and maybe doesn't have AD? Is he the right guy then? So that would be the only holdup.
Yeah, that's the thing. You don't want to hire a coach just for kind of this 2-year window. You're looking at, the next 5 years. And look, you mentioned something there, like, everybody's talking about Anthony Davis outlasting LeBron with Los Angeles. I'm not so convinced that's the end game there. Like, when LeBron hangs him up, I'm not sure AD is going to have the stomach to kind of rebuild in LA during the last prime years of his career. So I think you have to be looking at a long-term candidate. But Dan, like, who is a long-term coach in the NBA not named Spoelstra and Popovich? It's getting insane out there right now. I mean, this has been one of the wildest years in coaching that I can remember in a while. I mean, Adrian Griffin gets fired when his team is the number 1 seed halfway through the regular season. Frank Vogel, in 1 year with a team that nobody could have won more with. I'm sorry, you could not have done better given the circumstances Frank Vogel was handed in Phoenix than what the Suns did this year. And they got beaten in the playoffs by a team that looks pretty good right now playing in the conference finals. And JB Bickerstaff, we just mentioned, like, JB Bickerstaff, all he did was clean up the disaster that was the John Beilein era in Cleveland, got them into the play-in, got them into the playoffs, got them to the second round of the playoffs where they took a game off the Celtics before the entire team went on the injury list for the second half of that series. Like, I understand it's a players' league, but at some point, you got to back your coach, right? And if you have any questions about how, whether that's the right philosophy, two of the most successful teams in the NBA, over the last couple of decades are San Antonio and Miami. And they have the longest tenured coaches in the NBA. So I just get, these coaches need to have a longer runway to do their jobs, or else they're never going to be able to do them.
I can't imagine a year, and you could probably find this out, the last time you had 3 coaches who took their teams to the playoffs and got fired that year that they took their teams to the playoffs. I mean, Darvin Ham on that list too. Like, what were we saying about Darvin Ham last year? Conference finals coach. Look at what he got out of this team. They brought the band back together, and the team struggled. The roster was the biggest problem, more problem than Darvin Ham, and he's gone after 2 years. Like, what? You have to have some longevity here. You have to give coaches time to instill their philosophies, instill what they want to do. And you can't just have the threat of them getting fired every single year. It just doesn't work. It's proven to just not work. Before I let you go, Mavs or Timberwolves, who you got to win this series?
Oh, that game one was surprising. I guess it shouldn't be since Minnesota won the last series, taking 3 games on the road. I'm still going to go towards Minnesota. I think they're the more overall talented team. I don't think that. I think Anthony Edwards will be more aggressive in game two, as we've seen him in other games this series. And I just think Minnesota, and this might be the same way if they play Boston, but they are uniquely equipped to take on teams whose strength is on the perimeter, right? I mean, they have got so many elite defenders, from Edwards to McDaniels to Nikhil Walker-Alexander. Like, these guys are big time defenders, and I think ultimately that defensive strength is going to make Kyrie and Luka a little less efficient than they need to be, and I think that's going to help Minnesota pull it out in about 7 games.
What'd you think of the Barkley interview yesterday?
Oh, you're the best, Dan. That was great. Like, I mean, we all kind of grumble at our bosses from time to time. Don't napalm them like Charles did on that one. I do like your idea, and he kind of went along with it, of just doing the independent route. Like, sure. I'd watch that show on YouTube. I'd seek that out. I'd watch it wherever it was, and you could certainly sell it off to any number of outlets and make a boatload of money for it. I don't know how you feel, Dan, but I'm of the opinion this is not the end of Inside the NBA. You can't have, a bunch of guys who are, even at their respective ages, still in their prime television wise, like still elite at what they do. They're not going to go away. So whether it's with Turner or independent or somebody else, I have a hard time believing the end of Inside the NBA is near.
Yeah, I'm with you. Great to talk to you. Have a great weekend. Thanks for joining us as always.
You got it, Dan.
That's Chris Mannix, senior NBA writer, Sports Illustrated.